Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey guys, it's Adam here, and this is a little disclaimer for this video. This video began production in March of 2020, in the before times, in the long ago, before the bad thing happened. And as a result, basically, like, we filmed half of this video like the day before everything really fell apart. And so we couldn't finish it for about 2 years, which we've now been able to do. But as a result of that, this video footage is shot on multiple cameras. It is recorded with multiple different audio devices. And we unfortunately had some production issues on the second half of it where different cameras failed. And anyway, so it's a little bit of a hodgepodge as far as video and sound quality. So just bear with us. We did our best, patching it together, but I think it holds up. Before we continue, please do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe on this video and this channel. I always appreciate that. There's also a link in the description to my new channel, which is all about flying and eating, which is largely how we got this thing to happen at all. So please follow me on all that stuff, social media stuff in the description, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin.
I have a special guest, Ben Heck. I'm sure a lot of you guys know who he is. And of course, this is Roger coming back on the channel with the very rare, elusive Sega Pluto prototype. Now, today is going to be a very special day because Ben here has volunteered his time to actually repair and fix the Sega Pluto. Now, you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen so far with it?
I'm going to repair and fix it, huh?
It's the same thing, but you're going to do both.
Okay.
I haven't slept in 3 days. Give me a break.
Yeah, he just got in from what, Honolulu and Guam?
I flew from Saipan to Guam to Honolulu to Chicago to Madison in one go. You try it. You try it and then turn around and make a video. Anyway, hi.
Yeah.
We're going to repair it and fix it, which is going to involve two things that we discovered, which is that the door obviously does not close on this. You can see that. Now, what was your speculation on the problem with that?
Well, it looks like there's a little latch that comes in here and then goes into that indent right there. So it's going to kind of go boop to hold it closed. So you suggested possibly making a 3D printed part to fix it, but we might not even need to do that. Although if we can, it looks like it'll be all inside so you won't see anything. So that'll be good.
Good. And then the other problem is the controller port. It works, but you have to lift up on the controller in order to get it to respond, which we think is a cold joint, right?
Cold solder joint?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's where basically it's not technically cold, but it means the solder has broken apart. So you have the pin with a pool of solder around it, and after enough movement, it kind of breaks. So what we'll probably see is you'll see the post with solder on it, but there'll be like a break in the solder. Does that make sense?
It sounds fantastic.
I'm guessing that's what we'll see.
We'll say yes. I wasn't clear at the beginning, in case you're totally like, what is this? Roger here is the owner of the Sega Pluto prototype. We did an entire video together back in Campbell, California. Had a great time doing that. Do you remember this? You remember? It'd be really weird if you didn't remember.
I was there.
He was there.
I was there.
It'd be
that
weird
was me. Just in case you don't remember the squeaky little voice, that was me.
They liked you a lot.
I know,
in the comments.
it's so funny.
But yeah, so we're going to take it apart, or more accurately, Ben's going to do 100% of the work. And there's going to be a video of this more detailed on the teardown process and all that stuff. It's going to be over on his channel. The goal of this video is to give you some of the highlights as well as the end results. We're going to be testing it in a few different ways, including seeing how, what kind of, if it supports RGB, some of the stuff that we really couldn't test when we did the video originally, and then give you kind of a final consensus.
There's no stickers on the bottom.
There are no stickers on the bottom, although
we might even take a little turtle wax to it, give it a little shine.
Nice shine, make it all clean and nice. All right, and we are back. Now, a lot of work has been done to this. Ben, would you tell the fine folks out there what you have actually done to the Pluto?
Right, so we took it all apart and examined what was inside. You had a problem with the joystick port. It wasn't contacting properly. Now, I didn't find any cold solder joints, but I still reflowed everything as well. Anyway, just in case. And then there were some pins inside of there, so just like with the old Nintendo, you can actually go in and lift the pins in the cartridge slot up one by one to make them have better contact. I did this here, and now the controller port seems to be working properly. Also, the disc door, it had a notch, so the reason it wasn't closing fully is that it seemed like it wasn't complete. Like they never even got around to installing the spring that would actuate the little tooth that holds the lid shut. So basically we 3D printed a part, attached that as non-destructively as possible, added a spring, and now it works properly.
So we speculate that this unit would have been a display unit, just on, maybe like E3 or something. It would have just been up so you could see what was inside, and maybe the one next to it would be the one that would be always down. So that's speculation, of course, but yeah, now either way, it's fully operational.
Yeah, it is a pretty rough prototype. It is not nearly as refined as the PlayStation Nintendo prototype I worked on a few years ago.
Yeah. Now you were saying that there's something with the case too. You think it was like spray painted or something like that?
It definitely was painted, maybe not spray painted, but it was molded with like a beige plastic, and then this is all paint. So as I mentioned, I would say when you travel with it, if you take it to shows, keep that in mind. You don't want to scratch it. So I would say cover it with a soft towel and then put bubble wrap around it. Because, yeah, if you took your fingernail and you would leave a gouge. We saw that on the inside because when we added the 3D printed part, we had to scrape away the paint because you can't, well, you can glue to paint, but you shouldn't, right? You should glue to the lower substrate.
So, off the top of your head, what else stuck out to you inside that was different, excluding this part, which we'll get to specifically?
Well, it looked like a normal Saturn. We still didn't check, but it looked like it had more RAM than the original Saturn. But then we played, oh no, he said Darkstalkers, we wouldn't see that unless it was a Japanese version.
Only Japanese games ever use the extra RAM in this thing, so because this thing does not natively support Japanese games, we would need extra tools, quite simply, we don't have. But yeah, so we speculate the possibility that this thing had the RAM cart essentially built in, but without the capacity to test it at this point in time. We'll probably do that later on in this video.
We took lots of photos, so I can always cross-reference later.
So, I mean, from the layman's perspective, looking inside, I remember that one like green board that kind of stuck out, and it just said like "Mother" on it and stuff like that. Do you remember? I remember that being interesting. The board actually says Pluto on there, so it got that far.
Well, that separate board was the riser for the expansion slots,
right?
And then the motherboard is wider than a Saturn motherboard as well. Plus, it had that connector.
I'm talking about that green connector thing that just said "Mother" on it.
Right. That was for the expansion slots.
All right. Yeah. So that was kind of a unique little thing that we thought was kind of interesting. Now, another thing we found fascinating is we've got these two mounts on the back, which we'll talk about in great detail. One of them had some Japanese written on it, and it says a date on it, which actually verifies that this thing was built in '96. So this thing was 1996. When we originally thought it was 99, we were wrong. So 96. It also says that, you know, the thing was tested, it was ready. But there's also, strangely enough, on the board, there's this purple sticker written in Japanese, and we didn't know what that was. So shout out to my buddy Brett, who actually translated that for me. And what it says is, "What on earth is this?" So I have two theories behind that. One is that the engineer was just as baffled as you could have been, like, I don't know what this label, nice fancy Japanese label. It says,
yeah, it was a label maker label.
Yeah, so like a guy put that on there. But then I thought about this a little bit, and I'm like, what if that was the slogan they were going for? Because it was Earth, it's a planet. Pluto. Boom! There might have been some sort of half Japanese baked idea of like, maybe that's where we'll go. As I think we talked about this before, but an update to what we talked about one time was, so there was the Saturn and like the Mars, all these different Sega projects, and it was like, why didn't they have the first three? Well, they did. Sega CD was Sega Earth. That's why when you boot it up, you see the Earth. So you just have to wonder, like, is that it, or is it just a really confused Japanese engineer who just wrote down, what on earth is this? We don't know. We just don't know.
They were releasing so many consoles back in the 90s, they almost ran out of planets.
Essentially.
3 points.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the thing that I think was the biggest stunner to all of us. So it's got these two expansion ports. We knew about the modem thing. Nothing super special about that other than it's just an exterior modem. Because you could have got the Netlink, and I'm sure that would have worked on here as well. But what was the other one, Ben? Take it away. Explain the exciting news.
Oh, the other expansion slot had a hard drive in it, which would have been the first hard drive in a console by, what, 5 years?
Yeah, because the first one ever was the OG Xbox
One,
in 2001. Not Xbox One, OG Xbox. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Microsoft.
I don't want to get into Microsoft's
but that means, guys, that Sega would have had the first hard drive ever console in 1996.
Yeah, and 540 megabytes in 96 was... You look at like the Xbox 360, for instance, or the PlayStation 3. They launched with 20 gig hard drives, which in 2005 was a joke. Most people had like 80 or 100 in their computers. So the size of this hard drive for 96 would have been very contemporary with a standard computer.
Yes.
So that's what I'm getting at.
All right, fair enough. But yeah, so even though that this console never officially released, it does mean that this specific console, right here, the one right in front of us, is the first console ever to have a hard drive in it. Like this actual unit, because there are, except for the one in Japan, which we don't even know if there's a hard drive in it.
Right.
This is the only one on Earth known to have it. So what on earth is this? It's a hard drive console. Boom!
Well, then we tried looking at the hard drive.
Yes, that's more interesting.
Right.
Or is it?
Yeah. So I got some advice from Twitter, and they're like, do not plug that into Windows, whatever you do, because Windows might write to it. So what I did was I used my Ubuntu box, and I set it to not auto mount, basically auto mount disabled and auto open disabled. So when you plug something into Linux, it'll show up in the device tree, but it won't, pop up on your computer. It'll show it, but it'll say click here to mount. Because if you mount it, it might write something to the hard drive, right? So I didn't want that to happen. And so I bought that adapter to hook up a 2.5-inch IDE hard drive. Well, when I hooked it up using the adapter, it definitely spun up, and you could hear it go, and it wasn't making like, error sounds like.
Yeah, listen to it for a second.
But if you remember,
oh, isn't that fascinating? We can hear it clicking. Wow. Imagine you're hearing it right now, because they're hearing it. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
but when it was in the console, you remember I was like listening to it, like I was like, listening for the attacking army on the railroad tracks, and I couldn't hear it. And we definitely would have heard it if it was running in here. So something about this was not even powering the drive, which is why I think you shouldn't put the drive back in, no matter what.
Yeah.
We can look for data on it, but I wouldn't put it back in here because this is not accessing it properly. And anyway, so I wasn't able to see it with Linux. Then as a last-ditch effort, you said, okay, try it with Windows with that HDD Guru so we could just do a sector copy.
Yeah.
We weren't able to see it there either, which means, it sounds mechanically like it works, but it could be electronics. So what I propose that we do is we just buy that same model hard drive off eBay for like 20 bucks.
Yeah.
We take then we test it to make sure it works. So we hook it up to Linux. Oh, look, there it is. It showed up. It mounted. We can see it. Then we take the electronics off that board and put it onto the mechanics of your hard drive and see if that is able to restore it. So that might work. And if that doesn't, even though I think there's a pretty good chance the hard drive is going to be empty anyway, but if that doesn't work, then you could explore like actual like forensic recovery analysis.
Okay. Yeah.
But that would be the limit of what I would be able to do.
Okay, so we're wrapping up this segment of the video. We're super excited to see what comes up next. One of the things we're going to do is take this back to California and start testing it more extensively with things like RGB. We know it supports it, but we really want to push that. So before we do that, though, anything else you want to say about it? Like, what was surprising you? What was interesting that you learned here? And anything you want to tell Ben?
Again, saying that it was super interesting, finding out that it had the hard drive. I had no idea I even had that. And I thought it was cool that the board had different numbers on the parts. You probably know more about that in detail. The different...
I have no idea what those numbers meant. They're probably just keeping track of like what the components were.
Yeah, but it
like
looks super cool that it was actually that clean, that they were actually like, oh, 1, 2, 3, like...
Even if the hard drive, even if there's nothing on it or if it can't be recovered, it's still interesting because it had it.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, exactly. So I had first with the modem, first hard drive.
Yeah. All right, well, if that's it, then thank you, and we'll see you in the next segment, guys.
Hey Internet, it's me, Roger. I just wanted to check in and let you guys know I'm still alive, 2 years later, made it through COVID, and I still have the Pluto. It is not sold. I still own it.
Almost 2 years, and I can finally work on the Sega Pluto again. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But basically, everything you saw in the first half of the video about repairing it, all that sort of stuff's done. Now I'm back out in San Francisco, or more specifically San Jose, the Bay Area. I'm over at the Marseille offices. They're the guys who made the M Classic. They were cool enough to let us come over and play with all their toys to set this up. So the Sega Pluto, we've started testing it with things to see what it can and can't do. There were a few things on our list. First of all, we wanted to see if the hard drive would do anything. Spoilers, the hard drive was completely blank, so there was really nothing that came of that. We also kind of think that it wasn't really connected, so there's nothing really supporting it. Then we also wanted to test it with things like the Netlink, hence we have Sega Rally Netlink Edition. Now, what we learned was that the modem on the back doesn't seem to actually do anything, because if you have Sega Rally running with a Netlink, it doesn't boot up the same way. And I'll show you that here in a second, but basically fire this version up, and then it will boot up completely differently than what you just saw. So while we do that, the other interesting thing about that is the cartridge slot we thought didn't work for the longest time because it wasn't running with the Action Replay. The Action Replay would allow you to play things like imports, and potentially you could even play pirated games if you were to hack one, whatever. But the Pluto will not read them. We tried 4 different ones. See how that's different? See, that screen comes up because it does detect this, but the built-in Netlink doesn't seem to do anything. Go figure. But yeah, with the 4 Action Replays we tested, it couldn't read any of them. It got a reaction out of one of them, but just stayed in a dead blank screen the whole time. And this is what it should look like over on a Sega Saturn, normal Sega Saturn, but it didn't. So our conclusion is we don't exactly know what that's about. We at one point speculated there might be extra RAM in this thing, just like the built-in RAM that's supposed to be in those RAM carts. And if that's the case, that would mean there's some sort of potential driver conflict or something, a hardware conflict, and that's why they're not booting. We can't test imports. We can't test burned games.
We can only really test the Netlink thing, but we can only test it in one direction because we don't have two of these things.
For the record, we had the opportunity to try and test it with the Game Shark as well as the Interact memory card, but we opted not to do so. Those cards famously have thick pins, and once they're inserted into a Saturn, they have a tendency to basically break the cartridge slot, or at least they make it so that only those devices work on it because they space them out. So we didn't want to do that to a prototype, so we didn't actually test them, but technically we had the option. We wanted to test the VCD card slot as well. Unfortunately, we were unable to do so because all of the software ever written for it was either Japanese or European. As far as we know, no American software ever utilized it, which means since we can't get around the region coding problem, there's not much we could really do here. We know that the Satiator is out now, and we'd be curious to see what that could do with it, but unfortunately none of us have it, so in the end, we don't know if that works or not. The other thing worth noting, I think, is for the purposes of the footage that you've seen in the background, we had it connected because the Pluto supports RGB. We just ran it into a FrameMeister, and then from a FrameMeister to an M Classic, and then an M Classic into the television. And obviously it's not a great representation of how it looks, but I'll tell you right now, it looked pretty solid.
So thank you guys very much for watching. This has been a crazy journey, 2 years of this to tinker with the Sega Pluto prototype. I want to thank the guys at Marseille, the M Classic dudes, for letting us film in their office. That was really nice of them. They didn't have to let us do that. I also want to thank you, Roger, for letting us tinker with the prototype for 2 years. Yeah. There was this thing that happened for a year and a half or so that really kind of prevented us from finishing this damn video. And of course Ben Heck for actually doing all the real work on that. But yeah, any final thoughts? Anything you want to say about this?
I want to say this fucking M Classic is amazing. I've never really got to mess with one. I'd seen them around online.
I've been preaching this thing for years. It's awesome. But no, all right, what do you have to say?
Just the amount of difference it makes with like how sharp it looks right now, then you flipped it back and showed me what it would look like without it. It's like night and day. I love it. I'm totally getting one.
Yeah, no, and I'll put a link in the description if you guys want to check it out. But like, that's not why we're doing this. We just wanted a place to set this thing up, and they have all the best toys. But that was cool that they let us film here and all that. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. If you could please like, comment, subscribe. All social media stuff in the description. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'll put Roger's stuff in there too. You can hit him up. And yeah, thanks Roger, seriously, for letting us, not only being like a good owner of a prototype, you're like the right personality. You're like Terry, rest in peace, Terry Diebold. He was just exactly the same way. He's just a cool guy who has this really rare thing, and he just wants to let the world see it. And I have mad respect for that. So thank you for letting us do that. So
yeah, no problem.
Hopefully this guy will be coming to a convention near you where you guys can actually see this thing and play on it. So thank you, Roger. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you all later.